Hollywood has spent a century making the Old West look rugged and romantic. Dusty streets, wooden saloons, cowboys riding into the sunset. What they never show you is what it smelled like. Because if you could actually step into Tombstone, Arizona in 1881, the first thing that would hit you is a wall of stench so overpowering that visitors arriving by stagecoach reported feeling sick before they even stepped off the coach. Horse manure, human waste, rotting garbage, kerosene smoke, and the unwashed bodies of hundreds of people packed into a town with no sewer system, no running water, and no garbage collection. The Old West was not just dangerous, it was disgusting, and the filth killed more people than every gunfight in frontier history combined. Main Street in a frontier town was less a road than a living organism, pulsing with filth. Horses, mules, and oxen were everywhere, hauling freight, pulling stagecoaches, tied up outside every saloon and store. Each animal dropped between 15 and 30 pounds of manure every day, leaving the dirt thoroughfare layered in slick, green-brown piles. In the dry season, the sun baked this mixture into a crust that crumbled underfoot, releasing clouds of dust laced with dried dung. When it rained, the same street turned into a river of mud and manure so deep that boots could vanish up to the ankle. Flies bred by the millions in this muck, rising in black swarms with every passing wagon wheel. The air buzzed and stank, thick with the sweet, sickly odor of rot and ammonia. Boardwalks, those raised wooden sidewalks common in westerns, were not a quaint touch. They were emergency engineering, built to keep pedestrians above the worst of the waste. But even on the boards, the stench climbed up from below, and the gaps between planks trapped filth that festered out of sight. Every step through town was a negotiation with the street itself, a surface that threatened to swallow you whole. Behind the false fronts and painted signs of Virginia City, the alleys became hidden arteries of decay. Tax rules pushed buildings close together, leaving only narrow gaps where sunlight rarely reached. These cramped corridors, sometimes just a few feet wide, quickly filled with whatever residents wanted out of sight: garbage, food scraps, broken tools, and the contents of chamber pots. Without any organized collection, waste piled up until the air in these spaces turned thick and sour, drawing clouds of flies and rats. The stench was so overpowering that locals nailed up boards or makeshift barriers, hoping to contain the smell and keep vermin at bay. These alleys earned the nickname Outhouse Alley, a warning as much as a description, but sealing off the alleys only pushed the problem closer to home. Rotting refuse now festered just beyond bedroom walls, its reek seeping through cracks and windows. Disease spread easily in these conditions, and complaints filled the columns of the territorial enterprise. In the rush to keep main streets presentable, the filth was simply moved out of view, never truly gone, only lurking one thin wall away. Every frontier town relied on the outhouse, a wooden shack perched over a pit dug into the earth. In the crowded blocks of deadwood or tombstone, these pits were rarely more than 6 or 8 feet deep. When the hole filled, there was no cleaning or hauling away. The solution was simple: drag the shack to a fresh spot, cover the old pit with a thin layer of dirt, and start again. The ground beneath a cluster of homes became a patchwork of abandoned privies, each one holding years of waste just below the surface. In dense neighborhoods, multiple families shared the same outhouse. At dawn, lines formed in the alley, men and women shifting awkwardly, clutching their coats against the morning chill and the choking stench. Privacy was a luxury no one could afford. In summer, the heat turned these pits into chemical factories, boiling up a reek that clung to skin and hair. Flies swarmed in black clouds, breeding in the filth and then drifting straight into neighboring kitchens. The outhouse was both a necessity and a curse. its hidden contents seeping silently into the ground, waiting for the next rain to carry them further. Deadwood's Creek sliced through the heart of town, a narrow ribbon of water that carried more than just mountain runoff. Residents dumped chamber pots, kitchen slop, and animal remains straight into the current. Laundry women scrubbed clothes at the edge, letting soapy water and filth swirl downstream. At the same time, families filled buckets from this same creek for drinking, cooking, and washing, trusting that clear water meant safe water. But what looked clean often carried an invisible load. Outhouses perched on the hills above leaked steadily into the soil, their contents seeping through loose gravel until they reached the water table. Wells, dug only a few yards from these pits, drew up water laced with bacteria and waste. In mining towns like Deadwood, mercury and arsenic from ore processing joined the mix, drifting into the creek and settling in the mud. Tests, decades later, found mercury levels up to 100 times modern safety limits. Each cup of water was a gamble, a silent risk that turned daily thirst into a matter of life and death. In the rush for gold, the town's most vital resource became its deadly threat. Inside the saloon, the air pressed in from every side. Tobacco smoke drifted in thick layers, mixing with the sharp bite of kerosene from oil lamps and the heavy musk of bodies that had not seen a bath in weeks. Every surface seemed to sweat. Tables sticky with spilled whiskey, the bar top etched by years of elbows and spilled beer. Underfoot, sawdust covered the floor, not for comfort, but to soak up tobacco juice, spit, and whatever else missed a glass or a mouth. Each step stirred up a damp, sour cloud from the ground. The sawdust itself, darkened and matted with old stains. Flies traced busy routes across the room, drawn from the street by the promise of an uncovered food laid out for the free lunch. Slices of bread, cheese, and meat left open to every passing insect. Men leaned in close over their drinks, voices low, coughing into the haze. The heat, the noise, and the reek made the room feel smaller with every passing hour. Here, the saloon was more than a gathering place. It was a closed system, recycling the day's filth from the street to the bar and back again, each new arrival carrying in another layer of the outside world. Hotel rooms in frontier towns offered little escape from the filth outside. Travelers staggered in after days on the trail, hoping for rest, but found only another layer of misery. Beds were a shared commodity. On crowded nights, strangers were paired together, forced to sleep back to back on the same stained mattress. Sheets were changed once a week at best, sometimes less, and every surface crawled with bedbugs and lice. The itching never stopped. Cowboys clutched their boots and hats as they slept, knowing theft was as common as infestation. Even the wealthiest guests could not buy true privacy or cleanliness. Bathhouses promised relief, but the reality was a hierarchy of contamination. The first customer each morning paid the highest price for a tub of clean, hot water. With every new bather, the same water turned cloudier with sweat, dust, and skin left behind by the last man. By evening, the bath was a tepid soup of grime, soap scum, and whatever diseases the day's customers carried in. For most, bathing meant sliding into water already used by a dozen others, hoping that the warmth would wash away the exhaustion, if not the risk. In these rooms, the boundaries between strangers dissolved. Every scratch, every cough, every parasite became part of the town's shared burden. Beyond the outhouses and alleys, the town's neglect took on a heavier, more permanent form. Slaughterhouses and butchers operated steps from the main street, dumping piles of offal, such as lungs, intestines, and blood, into vacant lots or creek beds. Animal carcasses joined the refuse, left to bloat and rot where they fell, sometimes for days. The stench of decay settled over everything, thickened by the summer heat. Rats tunneled through the heaps, gnawing at bones and spreading disease as they scurried from garbage to kitchens. Stray dogs picked at the remains, dragging pieces into the street, while flocks of flies hatched by the thousands in the festering meat. Rot was not a passing nuisance. It was a constant, reshaping the town's air and soil into something sickly and alive. Dodge City's boom meant constant digging, building, and shifting of the ground. Each new cellar or foundation turned up something grim: bones tangled in the earth, skulls with bullet holes, ribs still wrapped in scraps of faded cloth. Workers kept shovels ready, not just for dirt, but for the remains of men buried quickly and shallowly, sometimes nameless, sometimes with the story of their death written in the fractures of their bones. Boot Hill, the town's famous cemetery, was never far below the surface. As the city sprawled over its own graveyard, the boundary between the living and the dead blurred. No one could say for certain how many bodies lay underfoot, or how many had been forgotten entirely. Progress in Dodge City meant building on top of the past, layer by layer. The cost of neglect and violence became part of the ground itself. Gunfights built the legend, but the numbers tell a different story. In 15 years, Kansas's 5 biggest cattle towns, Dodge City, Wichita, Abilene, Ellsworth, and Caldwell, counted just 45 murders combined. Even Bodie, California, infamous for lawlessness, saw 31 killings in 6 years. Meanwhile, disease swept through these towns year after year. Cholera, typhoid, smallpox, and dysentery claimed hundreds, sometimes thousands. In Dodge City, a single summer of disease could kill 10 times as many people as bullets ever did. The real threat was not a pistol at high noon. It was the filth in the water and the air, quietly stealing lives in the background. Sanitation may seem mundane, but history shows filth kills faster than bullets. Today, 1 in 4 people worldwide still lack safe sanitation. These are reminders that disease thrives where waste is ignored. The myth of a clean frontier lingers, but the stench of neglect is never just history. Share your thoughts below.